Hello, and welcome to the Unseen Question. There's a claim that religion brings people together, that it gives life meaning and teaches morality. But if you look closer, really closer, you start to notice that most of the wars, hatred, divisions, and even guilt we carry are born from the same thing we're told makes us good. Religion tells us it's the cure for chaos, but time and time again, it's the source of it. It tells us to love our neighbors, unless those neighbors think differently. It teaches compassion, but only for those inside the circle of belief. The moment a person says they know what God wants, the door opens to control, fear, and judgment. Because if your actions are justified by a divine command, there's no argument strong enough to challenge them. And that's exactly where the poison starts. When people surrender their ability to think for themselves, when they trade curiosity for certainty, anything can be justified. Burning a woman alive, silencing a scientist, rejecting medicine, condemning love. History has shown this again and again. You might think, that's the past. We're more evolved now. But the same thinking still lives in modern clothes. The idea that some invisible being is watching, rewarding, or punishing us still dictates laws, influences elections, and shapes the way children are raised. Children are born curious, open to wonder and discovery. But before they can even speak full sentences, many are told that questioning is dangerous, that doubt is sin, that thinking too much leads you astray. And so curiosity, one of the most beautiful parts of being human, is slowly replaced with obedience. Religion doesn't just demand faith, it demands surrender, not to a god, but to the people who claim to speak for one. Priests, pastors, imams, gurus, authority figures who stand between you and truth, deciding what you're allowed to believe, and when they're wrong, which they often are, they simply say, it's God's will. Look at the power that comes with that, the ability to control behavior, money, sex, identity, and even death, all under the illusion of spiritual care. Every major religion claims to bring peace, but each has blood on its hands. The Crusades, the Inquisition, witch trials, suicide bombings, sectarian wars. Millions have died over differing interpretations of the same so-called truth, and the more certain people are that they're right, the more dangerous they become. It's not just physical violence, though. There's emotional violence, too. Guilt, shame, and fear have always been religion's favorite tools. You're told you were born broken, that you're a sinner before you've even done anything wrong, that your thoughts are dangerous, and your body is dirty. And then you're told that the only way to be free from guilt is to devote yourself to the very system that created it. It's a self-sustaining cycle. Break you down, then offer salvation, the drug, and the cure. If that sounds manipulative, it's because it is. Religion thrives on dependency. It teaches people to distrust themselves, to outsource their moral compass to something external. So instead of asking, what is right, they ask, what does God want me to do? And that's how ordinary people end up doing terrible things, not because they're evil, but because they think they're being good. There's a strange irony in it. Religion claims to give life meaning, but it often strips meaning away from life itself. The idea that this world is just a test, or a temporary stop before some afterlife makes everything here feel disposable. The planet, the animals, even other people. If paradise is elsewhere, what happens here doesn't matter much. That's why environmental destruction, inequality, and even human suffering can be shrugged off with God will sort it out. It's an excuse that relieves people from responsibility. But the truth is, meaning doesn't come from beyond. It comes from within, from the way we treat others, the way we explore, build, and love. When you stop seeing life as a waiting room for heaven, you start to see how precious it really is. It's not that religion invented morality. It hijacked it. Long before commandments were carved into stone, humans already had empathy. Cooperation and compassion are older than any holy text. They're hardwired into us because they helped us survive. Yet religion came and claimed ownership of morality, turning natural empathy into moral debt. Be good or else. It's morality enforced through fear rather than understanding. And fear works. That's why it's everywhere in religion. Fear of hell, fear of sin, fear of disappointing a God who supposedly loves you unconditionally, but is ready to torture you forever if you get it wrong. The idea of eternal punishment isn't justice, it's psychological abuse. It's a way to control people long after they've stopped believing. Because even if someone leaves the faith, that fear lingers. It's why people who stop believing still feel guilty for thinking bad thoughts, or feel a spike of panic when they say they don't believe. It's conditioning, not morality. Then there's the illusion of unity. People say religion brings people together, and sometimes it does, but only within its own borders. Step outside those borders, and that same unity turns into division. Because unity built on exclusion isn't unity, it's tribalism. The world doesn't need more tribes, it needs more truth. And truth doesn't come from authority or tradition or ancient books. Truth comes from evidence, from testing, questioning, and correcting ourselves when we're wrong. Religion resists that. It tells people they already have the truth, that their book or prophet is infallible, and that questioning it is rebellion. But knowledge can't grow where questioning is forbidden. That's why science and religion have always been at odds, not because they're enemies, but because they operate on completely different principles. Science says we could be wrong. Religion says we can't be. That single difference has shaped everything. One opens the door to discovery, the other closes it. When Galileo looked through his telescope and saw something that didn't fit church doctrine, he didn't just see planets. He saw the cost of truth in a world ruled by belief. And even now, in the 21st century, people are still being silenced for asking questions that threaten dogma. In classrooms, in courts, in healthcare, religion still has a seat at the table, making decisions that affect everyone, even those who don't believe. It tells people what they can do with their own bodies, who they can love, what they can teach their kids, all under the banner of morality. But morality without empathy is empty, and religion often replaces empathy with obedience. If a system tells you to hurt someone, and you obey because it's God's will, you've traded humanity for submission, and that's how good people become instruments of harm. The tragedy is that so many genuinely kind, thoughtful people are trapped inside that logic. They're told that faith is virtue, and doubt is weakness, but in reality, doubt is courage. It takes courage to question the beliefs you were raised with, courage to face the fear that comes with uncertainty. But that's where freedom begins, in the willingness to not know, and to find out for yourself. When you stop needing a divine command to tell you what's right, you start discovering what it actually means to be human. You start caring, not because someone told you to, but because you understand why it matters. You start seeing people not as believers or unbelievers, saved or damned, chosen or lost, but as people, complex, imperfect, and deeply connected. Religion promises truth, but what it delivers is control. It tells you who you are before you've had the chance to find out. It gives you a script for life, but it's written by people who never knew you. And if you dare to step outside that script, you're told you're lost. But maybe being lost is just what it feels like to walk your own path. Maybe that's the beginning of clarity. Maybe freedom isn't found in worship, but in wonder. Not in obedience, but in understanding. Not in kneeling, but in standing up. Because the truth isn't something handed down, it's something uncovered. And once you start uncovering it, you realize that the world doesn't need gods to be beautiful. It's beautiful because it's real. Religion has always claimed to hold the keys to purpose. But purpose isn't something handed down from a pulpit. It's something we build piece by piece through our relationships, our work, and our curiosity. Yet religion convinces people that purpose only counts if it points upward, if it's approved by something beyond them. That's why so many live feeling small, waiting for a plan that never reveals itself, instead of realizing they're capable of making meaning themselves. And when life doesn't go as planned, when tragedy strikes or injustice happens, religion offers comfort by saying, it's all part of God's plan. But that idea doesn't heal, it numbs. It takes pain that should motivate us to act, and turns it into passive acceptance. When a child dies, when a storm wipes out a city, when people starve or suffer, religion tells us not to question, just to trust. But questioning is the most human thing we have. It's how progress happens, how compassion deepens. If you tell people that everything is the will of a God, you rob them of responsibility. And responsibility is what makes us human. We learn to prevent disease not by praying harder, but by studying microbes. We learn to stop famine not by divine mercy, but by science, engineering, and cooperation. Every step forward came when someone decided that maybe suffering wasn't sacred after all. The idea that morality, comfort, or community can't exist without religion is one of its most persistent lies. Morality doesn't need heaven to be meaningful. Compassion doesn't need commandments to be powerful. Look around. Some of the most selfless acts of kindness, the deepest empathy, the boldest stands for justice, often come from those who act not because they believe they will be rewarded later, but because they care now. Religion teaches that goodness must have a motive beyond humanity, but maybe that's exactly backward. Maybe true goodness is when you help someone knowing there's no cosmic scoreboard keeping track. And yet, despite everything, religion remains. It's not hard to see why. It offers belonging, structure, comfort in the face of death. The human mind doesn't like uncertainty. We crave patterns, stories, answers, and religion gives all of that neatly packaged, but at a cost, the cost of truth. Because comfort isn't the same as understanding. People say religion helps them cope with death, but coping isn't the same as accepting. When you believe death is only a doorway, you never really learn how to value life. You spend your years preparing for something that might not exist, while the one thing that does, this moment, slips away unnoticed. If this life is the only one we get, that doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it sacred. The sunset becomes more beautiful precisely because it won't last. The people we love become more precious because time with them is finite. The idea that eternity is the only thing worth living for is the saddest kind of blindness. Religion often disguises fear as faith. People say they believe because they have hope, but most believe because they're afraid not to. Afraid of what it means if there's no grand design, no ultimate justice, no second chance. But if you can face that fear, if you can stand in front of the unknown and still find meaning, that's strength, that's courage. The moment you realize that meaning doesn't require divine approval, life changes. Everything starts to feel more urgent, more vivid, because this, right now, is it, and that's enough. And when you really grasp that, you see how small religion's promises actually are. Do this and you'll be rewarded later. Believe this and you'll live forever. It sounds comforting, but it's also deeply transactional. It turns existence into a deal, and that cheapens it. What if you didn't need to be promised eternal life to value this one? What if kindness didn't need to be commanded, but chosen freely? What if love wasn't about saving someone's soul, but simply caring for them because they're here, like you? That shift, from fear to understanding, from obedience to awareness, is what frees people from the poison of religion. Because the poison isn't belief itself, it's the idea that belief must replace thought, that surrender must replace honesty, that authority must replace self. When you're told that faith is a virtue, doubt becomes the enemy. But doubt is the beginning of wisdom. It's doubt that made people ask if the earth was really the center of the universe, if slavery was really justified, if suffering was really noble. Doubt has always been humanity's way out of darkness. And maybe that's why religion fears it so much. Because doubt doesn't destroy truth, it destroys control. When people stop fearing the unknown, they stop needing someone else to explain it. And that's when the power structure collapses. The church, the temple, the mosque all rely on a simple formula. Convince people they're sick, then sell them the cure. You're told you're sinful, broken, lost, and then handed a solution. As long as you stay loyal, pay, obey, and when that pattern repeats for generations, it becomes invisible. It stops looking like manipulation and starts looking like culture. But culture isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just old fear wearing a new mask. You can see it in how people defend their faith, not with evidence, but with emotion. I just know it's true. It gives me peace. But comfort doesn't make something real. If belief alone could make truth, then every contradiction in every religion would be equally valid. And that tells you everything you need to know. Truth doesn't need defending, it just needs discovery. When someone tells you that questioning is dangerous, what they're really saying is, I'm afraid of what you might find, because real truth can survive questioning. It's not fragile, it's not sacred, it's real. And if something crumbles the moment you look too closely, it was never truth to begin with. So when people say religion poisons everything, it's not an exaggeration. It poisons not by destroying, but by diluting, turning curiosity into fear, kindness into duty, freedom into obedience. It replaces what's real with what's easy, what's alive with what's promised. But here's the hopeful part. The same part of the mind that once believed can also learn. The same desire for meaning that religion exploited can be reclaimed. You don't have to trade comfort for truth. You just have to redefine comfort. It's not found in certainty. It's found in honesty, in living fully, knowing that this brief, improbable existence is all we have, and that's more than enough. Life without religious stories isn't empty. It's open. You don't have to look up to find purpose. You can find it in the faces around you, in art, in learning, in laughter, in kindness that expects nothing back. You can still feel awe, not because you think someone made the stars, but because you understand what they are, and still can't help but be amazed. You can still feel gratitude, not to a creator, but to existence itself. You can still feel love, not because it was commanded, but because it's the most natural thing in the world. The truth is, you don't need religion to be human, but you do need humanity to recover from religion. And when you do, when you finally see that morality, purpose, and love were yours all along, the spell breaks. You realize you were never lost, never broken, never unworthy. You were just told you were. The cure for that poison isn't another belief. It's awareness. It's freedom. It's life itself. And once you taste that, you'll never want to go back. Even after people walk away from religion, its echoes stay, the habits of thought, the moral reflexes, the guilt that surfaces in quiet moments. It lingers like smoke long after the fire's gone. Because religion doesn't just shape what people believe, it shapes how they think. It teaches them to associate obedience with virtue and uncertainty with danger. It creates reflexes that whisper, "You shouldn't question that," even when no one's watching. Breaking free from that isn't just an intellectual shift. It's emotional surgery. It takes time to rebuild trust in yourself, to learn that you can make moral choices without a divine rulebook hovering over you. And that's the hardest part for many people, realizing that morality isn't obedience, it's empathy combined with reason. It's the ability to understand that other people's pain matters, even without a promise of reward or a threat of punishment. It's not easy to step into that freedom, because religion doesn't just offer comfort, it offers identity. It tells you who you are, who to love, who to fear, and who to hate. It defines your world so completely that leaving it feels like stepping off a cliff. But that's only because you've been taught that there's nothing on the other side. The truth is, there's everything on the other side. There's life in all its messy, unpredictable beauty. There's meaning you get to create, instead of meaning someone else assigned to you. There's love that doesn't need to be sanctioned by heaven. There's curiosity that doesn't need permission. And that's what religion fears most. People realizing they don't need it. When you see that you can live with compassion, depth, and purpose without divine oversight, the entire structure collapses, because its power depends on dependency. That's why religions always go after children first. They know that a questioning adult is hard to control, but a frightened child will grow into a compliant believer. And yet, some still escape. They grow up, start asking questions, and the cracks begin to form. They notice contradictions, hypocrisies, moral failures, and slowly they see the machinery behind the curtain. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not an explosion. It's erosion. Piece by piece, faith gives way to thought. And when it finally falls apart, what's left isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to think, to feel, to rebuild. But religion tells you that space is dangerous, that if you step outside the walls of faith, the darkness will consume you. What it never admits is that the darkness it warns about is actually just freedom. Freedom from guilt you never earned. Freedom from fear you never needed. Freedom from the illusion that your worth depends on invisible approval. When you let go of that illusion, the world doesn't shrink. It expands. You begin to see beauty in everything that once seemed ordinary. The symmetry of a leaf, the pulse of a city, the sound of rain on a window. All of it feels more sacred than any sermon could describe. Because it's real. You don't need promises of eternity when you realize how miraculous the temporary can be. And yet the world still clings to religion because it's afraid of what comes after. Afraid of a morality without commands, of purpose without a script, of existence without a guardian. But maybe that's what growing up as a species looks like, learning to guide ourselves. For thousands of years, humanity was like a child in the dark, holding the hand of a parent that wasn't really there. And maybe now, we're finally ready to walk on our own, not because we have all the answers, but because we're brave enough to keep looking. We don't need gods to explain thunder, or diseases, or the stars anymore, but we still have one last superstition to outgrow. The idea that without religion, life is empty. It's not, it's fuller than ever. When you stop looking for cosmic permission to be kind, you become kinder. When you stop living for eternity, you start living for now. Religion poisons everything, not because it's evil, but because it replaces reality with a fantasy that demands loyalty. It teaches people to deny what's in front of them, to love the unseen more than the living. But once you choose the living, once you choose to see the world as it is, imperfect and magnificent, the spell breaks. You stop chasing after divine meaning and start making your own. You stop fearing death and start cherishing life. You stop dividing the world into saved and damned and start seeing everyone as human. That's not the destruction of morality. It's the birth of it, because the highest morality isn't obedience, it's understanding. It's choosing kindness without command, courage without certainty, and love without condition. And when you live that way, you don't need promises of heaven, because you've already made something like it here. Religion teaches you to worship power, to kneel, to wait, but the real miracle is standing up, thinking for yourself, seeing with your own eyes. The universe doesn't need worship, it just needs witnesses. And that's what we are, witnesses, temporary, fragile, conscious beings who got lucky enough to exist at all. That's not poison, that's life. When you let go of religion, you don't lose meaning, you lose the illusion that it was ever given to you. And what you gain instead is freedom. Freedom to think, to question, to love without boundaries, to live without fear. And that's the truth they don't want you to see. 'Cause once you see it, you'll never need them again.